Welcome back, everyone. It's so good to be with you. I look forward to these Friday sessions that we have just to be able to pour into people and to be able to just answer some questions. So, I want to say thank you to everyone who was able to watch the broadcast we had last week, the live. There was a few of you who were on live and many more of you who watched it afterwards. So, I hope that you found the information beneficial. And so thank you for, watching. I would really encourage you to like, to share, and to leave a comment as we go forward. If you know anybody who would benefit from these or you would like to just pass on because it's informative, I would appreciate that as well. I do want to say thank you to Cheryl Shea Beatty for being with me last week and, just pouring into the community and sharing her insights and her wisdom, her knowledge, her years of experience. It's always so good to hear from somebody else other than me. And so I really appreciated her having her on the broadcast. I want to say too, though, that I apologize for a couple of things. One of those things is that it would appear to me that I got a couple of messages from people who wanted to comment or leave a question during the broadcast and were unable to do so when we were live. There was other people who had sent their questions prior, and some of you who had sent their questions to me privately on Facebook Messenger. So I appreciate all of that. Thank you so much for those of you who were unable to leave a message or a question during the live, but sent it to me through Facebook Messenger. That was much appreciated. And I think we got to all of those questions and to those that had come to me prior. So, thank you for all of that. I will work on trying to figure out why that happened. And then the other thing was the music was distracting. Apparently on your side, you could hear the music through the whole entire broadcast. I apologize to you for that. I don't know why that happened. It had stopped on my side. And so I was like, okay, we don't have music. We're good to go. But apparently that was not the case. And so I will try and figure that out as well. And we'll do better next time. And we will try to do this at least once a month. I don't know who we'll have on each month. It won't always be Cheryl Shea, but it will, I'll try to find other people who I could have talk about the specific topic we're discussing. So, I've been considering what to talk about as we move forward, and I could continue on in forgiveness. I could continue on in unforgiveness. I could talk about things like, resentment and anger, and I could talk about, offense and all of those things because they're all, kind of a part of that. They are all under a spirit of bitterness. But what I want to, because it's December, and I feel like I would be remiss in not talking about taking a couple of sessions to just talk about the difficulties of the season, because it is a unique time of year. It's the time of year when, there's all this joy and hope and happiness and love, but there's all the stress and the anxiety and the frustration and the expenses. And so I just want to say that I'm going to take a little bit of time to address some of those things. So again, I want to hear from you. Again, I appreciate you sending me messages privately, but I would really like to get conversation going on the site. So if you have something you want to talk about specifically about this time of year, I would really appreciate hearing from you. You can of course send it to me privately, but let's try and get the conversation going on the channel as well. So we're going to be talking, I want some of the things that I do want to talk about, and this is just kind of the intro to Christmas. I'm going to talk about things like the stresses of the season. I'm going to be talking about, financial pressure maybe, although that's one that people do talk about quite a bit, is the financial pressure, but the busyness and the anxiety that comes with the season and the time of year, and the pressures that come along with all the partying that we do and the gatherings that we have. And, there's so much pressure out there to do things that we shouldn't be doing. And, because we're not just going to have Christmas parties with believers, we're going to have, parties with the people that we work with, and there's going to be alcohol, there's going to be even with family members sometimes we can't guarantee that. So there's a lot of added outside pressures that come upon believers during this time of year. So we're going to talk about some of that as well, and kind of give you some tips and tricks on how to avoid falling into pitfalls that you've fallen into in the past, or how to handle especially some of those conversations that you might not want to have with Uncle Bobby and Auntie Sue and, Jim Bob and, your cousin Ralph. And we're going to talk about all those things, right? Talk about things like boundaries and that kind of stuff. Toxic family is a very real thing, and it's something that during the Christmas season it's almost impossible to avoid. You've got, how do you go home if you don't have a good relationship with your mother or your father or your grandmother or your grandfather, or maybe somebody in that arena has said or done something to you that's been harmful or hurtful. How do we work through those? How do we manage that kind of dynamic, right? What do we do if our son, our daughter, our cousin, our brother, is coming into the Christmas season and he has, an addiction of some kind? How do we manage these things? How do we work through them? So we're going to talk about some of that kind of stuff as well, so that we can portray Christ to the people around us while we maybe have some boundaries in place for ourselves. So those are some of the things. The socialization, we always look at Christmas and we think it's just fun and it's outgoing and there's lots of things to do and lots of Christmas concerts and lots of Christmas parties and get-togethers, and that's great if you're an extrovert. But if you're not an extrovert, these are things that can be very challenging to a person, and they can become just a burden to bear as opposed to an enjoyable time to have, right? And, we quickly get tapped out if you're not that person, if you're not an extrovert, if you're a highly sensitive person, if you've got anxiety. These things are not pleasurable. They can be very stressful. So we're going to talk about some of that as well. And so I want to hear from you as well, if there's anything that you would like to discuss as we move forward into this, right? We talk about the spirit of Christmas and the fullness of the sense, right? Yes, if we're celebrating Jesus and we're keeping Jesus at the forefront, we're keeping Jesus as the center, if we're keeping Jesus as our focus, that's great, but we still need to go out and we need to do some of these other things. So, let's take a look at the full picture. Let's break it down. Let's deal with some of the things that you are struggling with. So let me know. Like I said, send me a private message, send me a public message, put it on the site to get the conversation going, and we'll talk about it. We only have a couple of weeks until Christmas, but why go through it and then feel at the end of it? Like, January is a month when so many people go into the depression, and we'd like to look at that and say the reason that people go into a depression in January is because of the amount of money that they've spent. And I'm not going to say that there's no truth to that, but I think, sometimes is that we put ourselves into a situation in family dynamics or, work relations, or where we feel like we have to pull back on our boundaries, or relationships that are toxic to us, and we feel like we need to expose ourselves to those things again, and then we end up getting hurt again, or we end up being offended by something, or somebody said something or done something and it's pierced us and it was very hurtful. And so that's another reason why people struggle in January. So we'll pick up again some of the other topics that we're going to be talking about, but let's really get into some detail on some of these things. So what do you struggle with during the Christmas season? I don't want you to struggle this year. I want you to be victorious. I want you to go through Christmas and go, that was wonderful. I did it differently than I've ever done it before. I didn't fall prey to this or to the other thing, right? Like, to be able to walk through and say, you know what? I broke the mold this year. So let's take a look at some of those things. Leave me a comment. Leave me either privately. You can send it to me through Facebook Messenger, of course. You can send it to my direct text message if you have my phone number, or leave it here on YouTube. So if you are okay with other people seeing what it is that you have to ask or things that you'd like to take a look at, I would love to help you walk through some of those things. And I'll say this, I do know the reason I feel like this is such an important topic is because every year, and I think every counselor out there, every person who does inner healing out there, every pastor will find that their my calendar gets double booked at this time of year, and just this week, took on, four different people again, for this season. It's a tough season, and there's a lot of things to be discussed, a lot of things that people struggle with, and a lot of it has to do with family, and it has to do with pressures to how do I deal with that narcissist in the family? How do I deal with the flirtatious aunt? How do I deal with the drunken brother? How do I handle these things? These are all things that we want to take a look at. So, let's take a look. Let's dive in. Let's be real, raw, and honest, as I say in the title of this. Let's be real, raw, and honest. I've had my own issues during the Christmas season. And, you can have a family member that every year feels like they have to derail the entire gathering by getting upset about something and then getting in their vehicle and racing off because they're angry because things didn't go the way they wanted them to. That's been my experience, right? And so, there's the argument, and then there's the blow up, and there's the tension before all of that happens. And then there's the, well, I'm not putting up with this, and they get in their vehicle and they race off, and only to come back in an hour or two, only to revisit the whole thing all over again. And so we'll talk about that. How did I handle those moments? It went on for years until finally I just said, I'm not doing this anymore. And so I had enough healing that I decided that what I was going to do differently is I was just going to remove myself from that when it started. I wasn't going to engage. I wasn't going to try to pacify. I wasn't going to try to cause things to be calm. I was just going to go, if you want to argue and you want to be this person and you want to do that, that's great. You do that. I'm going to the basement with the kids, and I'm going to either watch TV or play a game with the kids that are down there, but I am not getting engaged in this. And so that was how I began to deal with it. And there's many other incidences of things that, people can go through. But for me, that was something that made a big difference. It did help to cause me to be able to pull away and to just do better during the Christmas season. And it was a big step for me. I'm not going to say that it didn't cause some ripples in the water. It certainly did. But you know what? I felt good about how I handled it. And I felt good about the fact that I didn't get caught up in sin by arguing and getting angry and getting offended or anything like that. I just simply disengaged myself. So these are all things, right? These are things we struggle with. And how do we handle the difficult moments of Christmas as well as some of the not so difficult? So like I said, let me know. Let's have the conversation. It's Christmas time, and we're going to talk about the spirit of Christmas, the good spirit of Christmas and the bad spirit of Christmas. And so there is definitely both. And I want your Christmas to be new, and I want it to be wonderful, and I want it to be joy-filled and Christ-centered. And so let's have the conversation. We'll see you next week. Be blessed.